of you, and our speaker, Dr. Anil Kakodkar. Today we have joined in the UGC CHETNA lecture series. As you know, UGC has been conducting the CHETNA lecture series during last couple of years, where we invite experts from different domains to speak about the best practices in higher education. And today is an important day for all of us, being in the teaching profession. September 5th is celebrated as the Teachers' Day. On behalf of UGC, my best wishes to all of you. As teachers, you have been contributing greatly in making our students good learners and lifelong learners so that they can contribute to the societal, economical, and cultural development of our country. My dear friends, today we have Dr. Anil Kakodkar, who is a renowned Indian nuclear scientist, and he is also the former chairman, Atomic Energy Commission of India, and he served as the director of the Baba Atomic Research Center, and he has made great contributions to India's strategic program on nuclear energy, and is amongst the chosen few involved in the first successful peaceful nuclear explosion experiment that India conducted in 1974 at Pokhran. We are very happy that Dr. Anil Kakodkar has joined us today to speak about the intersection between teaching and research. Friends, as all of you know, because you're all teachers, that there are certain qualities all of us must possess as teachers. For example, engaging students effectively in the teaching learning processes so that they become critical thinkers, they become problem solvers and solution providers. As a teacher, you also have to be empathetic towards these students because students have different cognitive abilities and they come from different economic and social backgrounds, and also they have different aspirations. So how do you make sure that in spite of this heterogeneity that exists among our students, you mentor each one of them using your skills of mentorship? And as a teacher, we often learn inside the classroom and outside the classroom that we need to listen to our students. We need to understand their concerns. We need to understand their aspirations. Apart from this, inside the classroom, if you want to make the students critical thinkers, problem solvers, as a teacher, we also must possess those skills. While I personally found in my own teaching profession that if you are actively engaged in research, you can bring additional value to your own teaching skills. Certain qualities such as listening to the students, being empathetic, engaging the students by being creative inside the classroom may not require your involvement very deeply in doing research because these are human qualities. But simultaneously, while holding these values, if you are also a good researcher, you can bring additional benefits to the students. For example, if you are a good researcher, you yourself will be a critical thinker. You have to develop a strong analytical mind, and you set certain goals in achieving the results in your research. You will be a good communicator, both in writing and also in the oral communication, which will help you inside the classroom. And being a good researcher, you also develop huge professional contacts. You will have a good networking among scientists. And if you're an experimental scientist, experimental researcher, you can also bring some real life experiences into the classroom as part of your teaching efforts. So there are many, many benefits of being a good researcher while being a good teacher also. I'm sure some of the things that I have mentioned resonate with your own experiences during your teaching activities. So today we have Dr. Anil Kakodkar to expand on some of these themes and also bring in his own long experience as a great nuclear scientist of India. So I invite Dr. Anil Kakodkar to make his presentation. Let me also tell you that this program is being live streamed across all the social media platforms of UGC. And we also know that in many colleges and universities, they actually project this program, this live program in big halls and assemble the students so that they can listen and benefit from these lectures. So I pass on the mic to Dr. Anil Kakodkar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me express my gratitude to you and to University Grants Commission. I hope I'm audible.
Yes,
right?
you are audible.
Okay. Yeah. So let me express my gratitude to all of you for this opportunity, but even more importantly, because I am talking to all of you on Teachers' Day. So greetings to all of you on Teachers' Day. Other than our family members and near and dear ones, if you have to identify somebody who remember for lifelong, are some of your best teachers, particularly from the school. And I'm sure all of us have experienced that bond. So I think it's a very happy and important occasion to be able to speak to you on this occasion. What I'm going to do is essentially sort of talk about some of my own experiences and engagements, essentially on the topic which I'm going to speak, the intersection of teaching and research. And there is the next part to this, more particularly for preparing the next generation. So if I can share my screen, just 1 minute. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes. It is visible.
Okay. So, so basically, as I was saying, I'm going to dwell on this topic of intersection of teaching and research, and to set the context or set the ball rolling. This has been a subject which I have confronted for a long time. For example, I have, let me, in the training school where I've spent 1 year before entering the Department of Atomic Energy, the teaching has been essentially by researchers, practicing researchers. I'm sure some of you are aware of the BARC training school, and there 90% teachers are practicing scientists from BARC and other DE institutions. So you get that 1 year orientation from people who are deep in pursuing research in their respective areas. I am also witness to several discussions at TIFR which had a long tradition of, for example, in the early stages, they engaged with University of Pune, and so both in terms of teaching and researchers. And also TIFR has this Homeoba Center for Science Education, where they are deep in education research, science education research. And there has been this discussion both at TIFR and later at IIT, which also have been very closely associated, about whether uh, research distracts teaching or vice versa, teaching distracts research. And uh, although there have been debates on this issue, but I think the final conclusion has always been that there is a great synergy between the two. And in fact, it leads to enrichment on both sides. If you are engaged in teaching, engaged with young students, I think you yourself get several things clarified, although you may be a veteran in that area. And at the same time, availability of young students benefits your research, because if you don't engage, then unlikely that students will gravitate towards you in the same numbers as it would be when you are teaching. So it helps your research. Uh, there are many other dimensions, but I'm not going to get into that at this moment. And some of it will come back to as we go along. But let me proceed. And so if I had to ask a question, for example, we are all talking about Viksit Bharat. We all know that quality education and research both are actually a prerequisite for achieving our aspiration. Now, but just to be clear, what do you mean by Viksit Bharat, or a leading country in the world? And to me, there should be three attributes. Number one, be a leader in, in regularly bringing out very high impact technologies which are never built by anybody else any time before. And if you are a country which brings out these technologies on the global scene on a repeated basis, now these technologies may be in the military domain, they may be also in a disruptive technology domain. And I think, I don't think it's the wealth of the country or other resources or anything else. They are all important, but they are as important as the ability to do so. The second attribute to me is the quality of life of the citizenry. And so the objective has to be to human development index to a level comparable with the best in the world. And the accompanying graph, a correlation of different countries according to their human development index. And of course, this is correlated with the energy, because that's the field I'm concerned with. But what you can see is the world is in three distinct parts. The blue dots on top, these are the advanced countries of the world. And you can see that their human development index is at around 0.95. India, unfortunately, happens to be among the countries which are the green dots on the left-hand side. And here the human development index is low, and they are all aspiring, they are all rising towards the top human development index. And we know that human development index is a parameter that's a kind of combination of the level of education, educational attainments, the health status, life expectancy at birth particularly, and the income level of the citizens. And all of them are, of course, education is a primary factor, but all of them are connected with education. There is yet another factor which is very important from my perspective, and that is the disparity in the society. You may become a leading country, you may become a very powerful country, or as an individual, you may become highly empowered because of the knowledge that you have acquired. But I think it's important that this should happen across the board. The disparity in society must be minimum. And in fact, I'll come in the next slide as to this is a kind of a challenge, but suffices to say that at this moment that you can't have a sustainable society in harmony with itself uh, unless the disparities are kept to a tolerable level. And there are many ways of looking at this disparity, and of course we don't want to see disparity in any form. But in Indian context, where the large population still lives in rural areas, I think if we focus on bridging the urban-rural gap, uh, surely it will make a lot of difference in terms of the harmonious, sustainable society. And to me, that also is an attribute for a leading country of the world, an advanced country in the world. So this is what I was talking about. You know, we are all talking about uh, uh, kind of taking knowledge domain forward, frontiers of knowledge forward. We are all talking about teaching the available knowledge to our younger generation. And of course, all this knowledge, we all know knowledge multiplies power in many ways. And fortunately or unfortunately, uh, with that power, one can develop as human beings. We are all real life human beings. There could be, tendency to exploit others, and that's an animal instinct, which is anyway there. We are all part of animal kingdom. But as humanity, as human society, we have developed human instincts, and that is moves towards taking, talking about welfare, making sure that the whole world benefits from knowledge without uh, kind of exploiting anybody. So inculcating human values through practice and mentoring is the key for sustainable welfare societies, even as knowledge becomes a force multiplier for human capability. And while that is important, so education, when we talk about, of course, we cover many disciplines. We are talking about STEM as a special emphasis these days. But I think this aspect is very important. And this actually uh, comes through practice more than by lecturing or mentoring. So it has to be, we must be able to put our younger students both in our houses as well as in our education institutions, that these values get inculcated. Now, a sustainable society, as I was mentioning earlier, we must make sure, of course, we want an exploitation-free society, and we must make sure that the minimum necessities, the typical identity, prosperity, security for everybody, this is something that we must ensure while respecting diversity in all forms. And constitution in our society, we always emphasize this point, but this must get ingrained in our minds, our philosophy. I would like to quote the famous quote from H.G. Wells at this point: "The civilization is a race between education and catastrophe." And I think it's a very profound statement. and we must leverage our demographic dividend. We have that great advantage through right quality education before it is too late. And I don't want to sound negative, but many times I feel that, if you don't do it well, the same demographic dividend could become demographic nightmare. And this kind of things have happened in other countries. So that's the importance of education that we must recognize. Now, very quickly, talking about research, teaching and research intersection, as I started in the beginning, I just want to cite some case studies. I talked about training school. We have this UGC DAE Consortium for Scientific Research, which is running for decades now, which is also a good collaborative ecosystem between the research facilities in DAE and the academic community across the university system. And now we have sort of broad-based that. There is also a BRC being located in Mumbai, a long-standing collaboration, which was there prior to the incoming of Homi Bhabha National Institute. And in fact, BRC was a constituent institution of Mumbai University at that time. And now, because of the rules that we had to change, but we still maintain good collaborative linkages between not just Mumbai University, but also across the university spectrum. So linkages between national laboratories and academia are very important. And whatever India has done in terms of, for example, the collaboration with CERN, more recently around Large Hadron Collider, collaboration with other international bodies, I think this collaboration has been, the collaboration between the university system and DAE labs has been of great value. Towards the later part of my career in atomic energy, when we had kind of taken the pressurized heavy water system to a level of good maturity, I realized that we may have to do things which rest of the world is not doing. And for example, we had moved towards thorium. And thorium, unlikely that other countries would take interest in thorium in any big way. And so it was important to shape or reshape the program where we were able to move things forward on our own. And this is where I realized that when I looked at the developments which have taken place within the country, how many of those technology developments are such which we have done first time ever, in the sense anything like that has not been done by any other country before. And then I couldn't find a very satisfactory answer. And in fact, that was the genesis of formation of the Homi Bhabha National Institute. It was primarily meant to be an institution that bridges the gap between basic research, which takes place in plenty in different atomic energy laboratories, and the technology development. And BRC, like, there are technology laboratories. So the idea was to do that. And we did talk about, now Homi Bhabha Institute is doing very well. For example, in the recent NIRF framework, it has been ranked 6th in research, 16th among the universities, and 27th overall in the country. But I must admit that in terms of bridging this translation research gap, I think even at HBNI we have miles to go. But I think that's important direction which we want to pursue. Same logic was adopted when it came to setting up NICER. In fact, basically, when the movement for ICERs was started by Professor Vijay Joshi, Professor Govind Sarup, and colleagues of that era, the basic thinking was that we should have undergraduate education in a level of high level research, atmosphere of high research. So there should be a lot of PhD level research in which the undergraduate students should also be able to, in some manner, get exposed or participate. And so the program itself was a 5-year integrated MSc program, uh, which was the basis. I was at that time asked by our Prime Minister that, well, ICERs are going on. Can DAE set up one more at Bhubaneswar? And of course, I jumped at that opportunity. So NICER came into existence. And on the same logic, we said that uh, there are, of course, universities, old universities, long tradition of higher education in the country. And while we are implementing this idea in new institutions like ICERs and NICERs, why can't we bring that in an existing university? And I think maybe if we can do that along with participation from proximate institution, in terms of resource persons, laboratory resources, what have you, that should help in rejuvenating old institutions. Mumbai University was, I think it's nearly 2 now, and very successful in terms of results. Very difficult in terms of getting people to come together, because they say old habits die hard. And I must compliment the people who have put in efforts to bring this institution, Mumbai University Department of Atomic Energy Center of Excellence in Basic Science. And since Chairman UGC is here, I would encourage that this could be adopted in the rest of the university system, particularly for old universities. I know it's extremely difficult, but a few volunteers, if they come forward and are willing to go through the trouble, I think it's a real example in terms of teaching and research, the improvement of that interface. I think when I was connected with IITs, I did have the occasion to be a part of that discussion when IITs decided to transform themselves from, see, IIT's brand is a BTech. Even today, the brand is primarily BTech. But IITs very consciously decided that they will emphasize on research at all levels. And of course, today, composition of IITs, there are more postgraduate students than undergraduate students. And I think that is what have brought IITs to the level of impact that they have. And I also know that several inter-university consortia, quite apart from the UGC DAE CSR, we have the IUAC or the IUCA. These are doing great work in terms of interaction between the academic community and exposing them to large scale experimental research. And also through that, some of them are now engaging into mega science program. I think it all is very, very important. Now, I think we need to notice that intensifying research that pushes frontiers of knowledge is important, and we must do that, and it's happening. But I would say, in addition, along with that, we must also focus on research that adds value to the society, because that is crucial to sustain both translating impact of the research and academic community's efforts to the benefit of the society, industry, and all. But I think it will also contribute to excellence in research or excellence in universities. And I'm sure the universities are working towards improving their ranking, it will go up quite a bit once you adopt these methods. So our university, higher education institutions, they need to be both knowledge creators as well as value creators. Now, in terms of value creation, I consider them at 3 levels, as it's written here in this slide. And I will start with the bottommost layer, which is a more common thing in India even today. It was probably the only way of value creation in pre-independence era. And that is leveraging raw material resources and pay for get from advanced countries. We have clearly graduated from there. And in terms of adoption of procedural knowledge to create value, particularly in terms of professionals, the Indian doctors, the Indian engineers, Indian architects, and many such professional people, they have made the best use of available knowledge from within the institutions within the country, and we have a large number of professional institutions, and also the research that goes on there, and these professional people also have contributed to a lot of research, and I think India stands very tall in global community in terms of their contribution in this area. I would call it adoption of procedural knowledge to create value, supporting core economies. It is, of course, it uses brain power work, but also a lot of muscle work that goes along with it. And so that I think we have done well. At the highest level of value creation to me is what is known as the research intensive commercial or industrial activities. In terms of research, we look at DSTs, our science technology indicators year after year, and I think all that parameters we stand tall in the community of nations. And also it is progressing, it's improving at a very rapid pace. So that part we have done extremely well. But converting that to value, that is going on, industries are taking interest, but that today is happened more by research happening elsewhere than research happening within the country. Now today, the maximum value addition that can happen, or the maximum contribution to economy can happen, is out of what one calls the research intensive industries. Because the new domains where economic progress will really take place, they are really advanced. The domains of genetics, quantum physics, sciences. These are, of course, we know these are currently very active research areas in our universities. But I think we should recognize that these are also very active areas of economic activity in many universities and in the industries abroad, and of course, to some extent, Indian industries also. And this is where, for example, United States, China, they are making very rapid strides. And I think we should pay some attention to how India can mobilize itself. We have all the ingredients to do that, but we should be able to take that forward. Now, if you see across this level, from the bottom level to the higher level, the value creation potentials decidedly goes up exponentially, I would say. But the knowledge intensity is also higher. And this is where the research teaching interface needs considerable strengthening, according to me. Now, let me quickly move on to some other aspects which I think we should be able to recognize. The question is, we all, in our universities, we all do research. There are requirements. For example, career progression depends on how good a teacher you are, but in higher education, it also to some extent depends on what are your research contribution. So I don't want to get into that because that we are all knowing. I just want to draw your attention to this paper based on the uh, just a minute. I just want to draw your attention to this paper by Stokes, which is a dated paper, old paper, but it's very interesting in terms of the priorities of research. Research for research sake, pushing the knowledge, it lies in the quadrant which has been named Bohr quadrant. So the reason is obvious: curiosity-driven, pure voyage to discovery. And I think India is doing well. We should do better, but it is doing extremely well in that domain. On the opposite side of that is the Edison quadrant, which is pure applied work. The inventor driven to solve practical problems. The author calls it Edison quadrant. And I think that research is also equally important. Now, what is important is the posture, and I think we are from Bohr quadrant to posture quadrant as well as Edison quadrant to posture, because that represents the work that locates at the center of research in an area of basic scientific ignorance that lies at the heart of a social problem. And this is what we should emphasize on. We all know at the COVID times how important it proved and how all of us felt very proud when India brought its own vaccine on the market in such a short time and made an impact for India, but also for the world. Now, what is it that we should make sure that does not happen is the fourth left quadrant, that the last quadrant, which is titled Science That Goes Nowhere. Now, I think all of you understand what I mean. All of you know what is happening. And I think we should all put in efforts to prioritize our research moving in that direction. I want to talk a little bit about the value system that we need to adopt, because what I said is easily said than done. And if you want to really achieve that, we must motivate our academicians and researchers to get into those domains. That means that the value system that they pursue, and which is closely linked with their career progression, and the value system that the institution in which they are located adopts, those value systems must be well aligned. If they are not aligned, then there is a problem, and I'll come to that in just a moment. Now, another important feature which I think we need to recognize, and I have borrowed this slide from University of Tokyo, and so if you see that ellipse which represents PhD courses, and the lower part of that, I think it's just the same as what we have in most of our universities. There is practically no difference. But the difference lies, and not across the board there is a difference. There are some exceptions, and in India also we have institutions like that. But where the difference lies is the upper half, which talks about group R&D, basically for commercial products, market, social infrastructure systems. And if you see the bar on the right hand side, education sharing between the university and industry, you see the continuity right from bottom, where we are emphasizing individual research, even there must be some education sharing, and that I'm aware does take place in our own institutions as well. But I want to look at the upper part of this, where the education sharing, uh, the participation of industry has to be much, much higher, in fact, near 100%. And there we are talking about uh, addressing the problem society industry, the skill sets required for that, the uh, ecosystem required for that is quite different. And now that government is giving emphasis on innovation, startup culture, things are coming about. But I think this is where we need to focus and bring those skill sets. Uh, Talking about skilling, I think we should also be very conscious that uh, we talk about skilling in a very mundane sense, in the sense whatever we learn at ITI is skilling. I want to put it across to all participants here that even if you want to be a good researcher, a good experimental researcher, you can't be one unless you have skills of the right kind, and that is experimental skills. You must be able to make your own equipment by yourself, and so on and so forth. And so, when we talk about skilling, where there is a lot of emphasis these days, and that should be integrated with education at all levels. But when we talk about higher education domain, I think we should emphasize on skills at that level. And that is absolute. And I think our engagement with mega science, some of the universities which have participated, they must have felt this and benefited from this approach. Okay, I want to jump. My slides have got displaced, I think, but I want to jump a few slides and come back to other. I was talking about value system, and now I want to illustrate that by way of an example. I'm talking about now I'm talking about mobility, the technologies required for mobility. On the bottom is a picture of the high-speed train, bullet train, for example. And on the left-hand side bottom is a picture of a maglev. Now imagine, and similarly on the right-hand side, I have given some features of what one will call an applied research institution, or for example, an engineering college and things of that kind. On the left-hand side, I'm talking about institutions which are what one may call fundamental research institutions, typically of the type of, for example, TIFR, or many of our universities, they are very strong in fundamental sciences, in basic research. And then if I ask a question that if a speed train, bullet train, I think larger chance of that happening or that being successful in an applied research institution. But if I try to do the same thing with respect to maglev, I'm not saying happen, because I think this distinction between applied research and basic research is self-artificial according to me. But the fact is we have those institutions, and to me, if you take up that work in a fundamental research institution where people understand the electromagnetics better, I think there is a larger chance of success in doing that. Now, you want to do that kind of work, the value system in fundamental research institution must be of a kind which will sustain people who are capable of doing so, and vice versa. You want to do, say, maglev in an applied research institution, you will require people who understand electromagnetics in a more fundamental way, and they should survive in an applied research institution, which many times are bolt institutions. And this is where those value systems become important. And I think it for the leaders of these institutions to spell out what are those things, and rather than just sitting in terms of papers, impact factor and all, because after all, to me, paper and impact factor is a measure of impact on peers in the core area of work that you are pursuing. Now, but there are other ways of measuring the impact on peers in addition to publication. Must be brought in. This is not the time to go into detail. Similarly, there is a downstream partner. If I'm doing applied work and in the industry nobody wants me, then the impact on downstream partner is zero. And according to me, such applied research is worthless. At the same time, for example, impact on society. So I think as leaders, we must create value system which will be, as I said, in harmony with the objectives of the institution and the value system that goes in for of the work done by people within those institutions. Now, in this context, in this broader context, let me look at some challenges. For example, we do collaborations are important, but what is motivation? And I would say majority of people, the motivation, I should have some collaboration because then I get access to labs abroad, which is very important. And then you want to get into collaboration, then you certainly get into a domain where there is interest of the foreign lab. And in so doing, I'm not saying this is an important thing to do because there is a lot of learning there. We should about in so contribute to programs outside and less to programs inside. In terms of moving towards the cutting edge of science, these collaborations are important and we should do that. But across the board, that rush towards doing so is what I'm questioning. Because on the other hand, we have several problems back home. A problem of malnutrition, for example. When I was doing TIFAC, the technology vision document, the grand challenge before the country, when we talked about across the board, the anemia among the women and children came about to be the most important and yet intractable problem. Then I asked ICMR people that is this so, and they also agreed. So several years after independence, able to solve that there is now this which is being pursued advanced research development, metabolism and aging, which is an across for Vellore Medical College. There are some institutions in Northeast, in Maharashtra, and there is Valavalkar institution. And they are all addressing these issues in a very comprehensive way. Now, this research requires longitudinal work across, and I think in the country we don't even have mechanisms to support that. But that is important. And similar to education, for example, that is, for example, most around research in other countries. Why can't we look at Indian situation, the Indian rural setting, so much of diversity, lack of resources, lack of teachers, and now figure out the right ways of doing so. These should be the matters for priority. And then there are several other I have listed. I will not have time to go in through details of all these, but I think these are all very important topics for research, which our academia should be pursuing, in my view. We are now talking about implementing new education policy or national education policy. That requires, on one side, we have to create opportunities for choice-based learning for students, and so that requires creating a lot of diversity. At the same time, there is emphasis on skills. Now, the problem is smaller institutions, a college, an autonomous college, or even some universities are not very large. For them, it is very difficult to create the kind of choices that are kind of embedded in the philosophy of NEP propagate. So, I'm connected with MKCL, and I know a few other institutions are also doing that. But the important point I want to make is that we need to create an ecosystem where students have much wider choices. For example, under this program, MKCL has created more than 200 plus 2-credit courses, which are being adopted in various integrated degree programs in different disciplines. Here is example of for a 6-semester BSc IT program, what could be the courses. And similar things are happening, but I think for implementing in a kind of effective way, we need to do large for realizing the objectives. To 4 or 5 minutes, I'll conclude now. One is this a bit philosophical thing. India has a lot of knowledge tradition. We also had great technology in the past. India was indeed the technology leader in its time. What has happened? And to my mind, although we have had that knowledge tradition, we have put our knowledge on a pedestal. Discourses, but the knowledge and the knowledgeable people, the wise people, they only thought important to distribute the knowledge, engage in day-to-day activities of society. Of course, we cannot avoid. Everybody has to engage. And so what I'm trying to bring about is this question of mindset. A mindset which is primarily transactional. If I'm engaged in, say, economic activity without participation of knowledge in that engagement, I'm becoming a trader. And that mindset is a pure transactional mindset. On the other hand, if I'm engaged in knowledge, for example, innovation, for example, creating something new, entrepreneurship, new products, technology, now then there is some new creation. And it is as creativity as many. And if you have that, then I think your mindset goes beyond transactional mindset. And that bring knowledge down, fully integrated with society and economy. And that, to my mind, should be the task of our academic activity, both teaching. So talking about rural India, where I think, as I said earlier, requires greater attention, I have been called silage. The idea is we are in new age society. In new age societies, there are opportunities everywhere that didn't exist. For example, village couldn't boast of doing big things in service sector. Today, with advent of IT and economy and other exponential technologies, if we do a good job of education in villages, I see no reason why villagers can't effectively contribute to India's economy, because service sector is half. Now, the larger youth force in villages, how to bring that in the mainstream? And so I call this village, which is actually a best of city in a village, or a digital city in a modern village, or knowledge-based ecosystem for integrated education, research, technology development and deployment, as well as livelihood and capacity building in rural areas. And I think this is something that we must move forward. I know some of the open universities are engaged. I don't know that it have mandate to income number of villages they have to adopt. But I think we must intensify this activity. I think, as I said, problems that can be in the highest level of research institution. The RMDA is being taken up by TIFR, or you address the problem. People will be properly oriented, not in terms of knowledge and application, but also in their mindset. It is very important. I am actually involved as a part of our state commission, Rajiv Gandhi Science and Technology Commission, in setting up such things at 2 or 3 places in Maharashtra. What is happening in Gondwana University, Gadchiroli, where they are focused on livelihood activities, on aquaculture, bamboo craft, the non-timber forest produce, and incubation activities. But they have also started a diploma course on bamboo craft. They are paying attention to livelihood, but they are also training youth on it relevant to similar thing tried Nandurbar, and earlier we tried to do this at Pandharpur. But this is something which I think is very important. And with the end of my slide, and that gives importance to diversity. The biological diversity is so important. Genetic diversity is so important. Also diverse among our people and make sure that everybody gets opportunity. But that thing in terms of education, we should get deeper into our education framework, more particularly where there is deprivation. So, for example, rural areas, if there are many forms, something including child education, I mentioned. So, while we need, this cartoon is self-explanatory, but India is a large country, practices, so you have to make sure that there are no malpractices. And but I do believe that autonomy and people utilize their autonomy the right way, and of course punish people who don't do that, but in them to do their own things, reinvent themselves, would be probably the way. I would think this for the development of our country, taking it forward, both reducing disparity, development of deprived domain, particularly rural, as well as development of the country to the forefront in the. I think both ways, teaching is important. Of course, teaching has always been important, but research and teaching, that synergy between the two has to be leveraged to maximum. And I know there are many other points to be covered, but I thought I'll just cover on the basis of whatever little experience that I have. And so with that, thank you very much for your attention. Can I take out my
Right.
slides?
Thank you very much, Dr. Anil Kakodkar, for a very comprehensive presentation on the intersection between teaching and research. I'm sure many of the ideas that you have presented will trigger further discussion among our teaching and student This is a very well attended by teachers and students and heads of institutions from across the country. This lecture will also be available on our social media platforms, and I'm sure thousands of and students across the country will watch and benefit from this. On behalf of UGC, I once again would like to thank Kakodkar
Thank
for
you.
delivering this lecture. Thank you, sir. Namaste.
Thank you.